Thank you so much for talking to us this morning. Definitely an issue that, has raised the ire of many South Africans and even more people around the world. If I can start with you, Shani, what are the underlying reasons here? Because I know you've written about the subject extensively. What did you find are the underlying reasons here for this, verification testing, as they call it?
Okay, so from the IAAF side, their underlying reason is specifically that they believe testosterone levels lead to a competitive advantage across the board. That has always been their stance, and it continues to be their stance. So they believe that the advantage that you gain from your higher levels of testosterone is unfair towards your fellow female athletes. What a lot of us who do the research in the subject believe is that that should not be the case. It shouldn't matter, even if there is a competitive advantage, that you have this competitive advantage, because it's a natural advantage.
And Moditambi, you obviously are somebody that has been, in the sports world for, a long, long time. When it comes to, this particular type of testing, do you get a sense that it didn't start with Caster? Is it likely to end with her?
That's where we have a problem as women in sports South Africa, because the issue is that the case of Caster is not the first one, and it's likely not to be the last one. And how do we encourage more girls to participate in sport if such cases are going on? And that is our biggest challenge, because of a mother who's sitting in a village would now doubt whether their child should play sport or not.
And Antoinette, if I can bring you in here, this is, one of those issues that has raised, quite a lot of questions about gender equality, even in sports now. Does this set us back in the fight to ensure that, as Mudidambi says, we get a lot more young women coming into, to the world of sport?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it sets us back, but like your guests have mentioned, this is certainly something that's been on the cards for a long time. I think a few years ago it used to be even worse. Women were violated by having to expose themselves to prove that they're a woman. So I think this is just an extension of this need to police women's bodies and for you to try and prove yourself for what it means to be a woman.
And you've written extensively, of course, on the subject, and also what Caster has had to go through, and a lot of that. Looking at what, some of the attacks as well that she has had to endure, even during some of those races, before they had to now undergo this verification process. It doesn't look like even after, whether she gets a positive or a negative verdict, it's going to stop.
Yeah, certainly. But one thing I am very encouraged about is how South Africans' views have changed. I think if you look back when she was very young and she first came onto the scene, South Africans were sort of in the same park as, the Lindsay Sharps and whatever they're at now. And I think that perspective has changed, which gives me a lot of hope, meaning perhaps, we can move forward. Because if South Africans can switch so radically, perhaps the rest of the world can realize that actually this is just normal, And Shani, if I can bring you back in here, one of the things that Antoinette touches on, which I wanted to also touch on, is how, the testing used to be done in the past, and the fact that as a woman you still have to continue to prove that, I actually am a woman. Do men who produce the higher level of testosterone than their competitors get put under the same microscope?
No. So historically, gender verification has only been directed against female athletes. Male athletes have never had to prove that they are men. It's never been questioned. With the regulation specifically, if we bring it back to Caster Semenya and her situation, men also have high levels of testosterone that are above the normal that would be considered normal for the male range. Yet nobody questions that they should be allowed to compete. And in the Juti Chand case, I know you spoke about that earlier, it's very interesting because it's something that she raised, and she posed the question to the IAAF, why are we only looking at female athletes? Why are we not looking at male athletes? And the IAAF responded by saying, well, there's not enough scientific evidence that says that male athletes gain a competitive advantage by this, while they still maintain that across the board, high levels of testosterone leads to a competitive advantage.
But isn't that then strange, because the testing does not necessarily have to come from them having proven something scientifically before. It can come from a rumor.
Yes, that's exactly the problem that we have with the testing. And a lot of testing that is done now, not only in Caster Semenya's case, but a lot of other sports organizations also use gender verification methods. And they do it on a suspicion-based verification. And the main problem with that is it can come from a jealous competitor. It can come from some kind of rumor going about. As long as the medical official has a suspicion that there is something to doubt, it doesn't even need to be concrete, they can test.
And would it be better, would it make the situation less bitter if men were subjected to this as well, or do we not need to do this kind of testing at all?
I don't think we need to do this testing at all, because of one thing, that according to scientists, there's never a research that can specifically identify what is the problem or what is the cause. So if there's no scientific study made in that area, we shouldn't do it. We don't understand why they are doing this, because of it creates the same problem that she's mentioning, where you find people suspecting that an athlete is whatever, and they end up saying we should test her. Or some of them, and I have seen that in netball, where girls were suspecting that a girl is not a girl, and they wanted her to take off her clothes. And it's creating a lot of problems. And actually, it's a human rights issue, because at the end of the day, you are interfering with the human rights of individuals.
And now the IAAF claims, and still says that this is to rule out gender fraud. And do you get a sense that they're succeeding in that, or is this what Antoinette also has touched on, and what Caster Semenya's legal team was saying, that it's the policing of female, the sex of female athletes?
They are not successful because of one thing, is that they are not coming up with scientifically study which could identify that it causes a problem. So the issue is that if they are not successful, why are they doing it? Why are they doing it? Because of there's no way where they can say, even if it's scientifically, again, it will be against the human rights of an individual. So it doesn't matter whether they perform it right or not, but it's against the human rights of an individual.
And Antoinette, if I can just bring you in here as well, whatever the verdict, this is definitely no doubt going to have an implication going forward.
Yeah, definitely. And just one more thing I want to raise is the IAAF say it's because of this unfair competitive advantage, but according to the regulation they're proposing, it won't apply in events like hammer throw and pole vault, where are the two events where their own science found there's the biggest advantage. So either way, yes, absolutely. It will have a big implication going forward for all sports. But as everyone has mentioned, it's certainly not the last we're going to see of it.
And talking about certainly not the last, you've written about this subject. Take us through some of those that have had to, go through this verification process, and some of them have ended up with, challenging the IAAF's regulation.
Yes, so you mentioned Duty Chand already, who was the most recent case. But I think even if you go as far back as the early 1970s, 80s, women used to have what's called gender verification certificates. And if you didn't sort of have this certificate, then you couldn't compete. And the current 800-meter record holder, who's often brought up, again, very ironically, people police her by the way she looks. She was one of the athletes who had to have the certificate. So I think the other positive is we are reaching a stage where the resources are available to athletes to try and challenge these, I don't know what you want to call it, middle age, dark ages regulations. So that's a positive. But who knows what's going to happen in other sports.
And Shandi, does she stand a chance? I'll bring you in just Mudita.
I think that she does stand a chance. The only problem and concern I have is that it's at CAS. And CAS is a sports court, which has always been the problem for athletes trying to bring up human rights in sports, is that CAS consistently disregards those kind of arguments. In Juicy Chan's case specifically, the court actually fails to answer her questions on human rights in its interim award. It only focuses on the science provided by the IAAF, and that's the problem.
Mudita, you wanted to come in there after?
Yes, I wanted to come in on that because of in 1999 when we were hosting All Africa Games, we had a case where in the All Africa Games they want to do gender testing. And the reason why they wanted to do gender testing by then, they were focusing on Mutola as an athlete. So the issue is that whenever people are suspicious of certain athletes, they would apply these rules. And we totally have to fight against these rules because of people can misuse the rules for their own benefit.
And what does this do to the psychology of the athlete?
That's it. It does frustrate. We are lucky today that we have a Caster who's very strong in character and she can fight back. Imagine if it was another girl who couldn't actually fight for him herself. She would have moved out of the sport and we would have lost many women in sport.
And Antoinette, if I can bring you in just as, you know, as a parting shot, how do you think then, moving forward, things need to be in order for athletes not to be policed in such a manner?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think that's ever going to stop, but I think Semenya's outspokenness, you know, she's very quirky and she sort of uses social media to just say, you know, I'll be a bit funny about it. But I think it's important that everyone is considerate in this discussion because it's a very simple thing in that people are trying to tell women what it means to be a woman. And I think the more outspoken voices we have in saying this is wrong, that's very important. And for Semenya to be the flag bearer, despite the way she was treated before, is immensely important. And I think the age that we live in, you know, social media and all of this stuff, people are very reactionary. And I think it's important that people just step back and be considerate. And I know that's a very huge ask in this day and age, but I think being considerate and focusing on the science, because even if CAS just considers the science that the IAAF has put forward, that science in its essence is weak and has already been debunked by other scientists. So whether you want this protected category, as they call it, or not, that's a different discussion. The science as it is now is weak. So even if you want to debate on that, then sorry, like it's already been proven that it's flawed.
Thank you so much, ladies. I wish we had more time, but definitely when that verdict comes at the end of March, we must definitely pick up this discussion to look at how, you know, these issues can be resolved going forward. Thank you to our guests, Law Associate Shani Bartlett, Chairperson of the South African Women and Sports Foundation, Muditambi Ravele, and sports journalist Antoinette Miller.